In this video we'll review what we looked at in class about solving percent problems. When there's a statement about percents, it'll often be in this kind of form. It'll say something like some fraction of some number is another number, or it might say the percent of some number is another number. For example, 3/4 of 300 is 225. There's a statement of some fraction amount of some number is some other number. Another way of saying the same thing with percents is to say that 75%, because that's the same as 3/4 of 300, is 225. And that's worth taking a minute to notice that a fraction can be written in three ways. It can be written as a percent. In this case, 3/4 is the same as 75%. It can be written as a ratio fraction. That was the 3/4. Or it can be written as a decimal fraction, 0.75. Regardless of which of these three ways we write the fraction, the statement in English can be translated to a mathematical statement by replacing the of with the multiplication and using an equal sign for the is. So doing that translation, 3/4 of 300 is 225 becomes the mathematical statement. 3/4 times 300 is 225. And that same statement with percent would be 75% of 300 is 225. That becomes 75% of 300 is equal to 225. Usually when we've got something stated with percents, they almost always leave the of in. And usually we'll convert the percent to a decimal when we're translating it to mathematics. So there we are looking at that same statement with the percent translated to a decimal. 0.75 times 300 is equal to 225. That's the statement that 75% of 300 is 225. So when we have one of these statements where a fraction of some number is another number, if any one of those three parts are missing, we end up with an equation that we could solve. Let me just slide this statement up a little bit so you can read it. So once we use x for the unknown and write the mathematical statement, we get an equation that we can solve mathematically. So let's look at three examples. First, 75% of 300 is what number? This what number part will be the x, and so we get the equation. 0.75 times 300 is equal to x. Notice that we first change that 75% to a decimal. And so we've got 75% of what number is this some other number. So this is an especially easy equation to solve. I mean, all that we've got to do is multiply that 0.75 times 300. That tells us what the unknown is. Hang on just a second. There was a typo there. So that tells us 0.75 times 300 is 225. And so therefore that unknown number is x. And the answer to our question is that 75% of 300 is that 225 that we just found. So here's our second problem. 75% of what number is 225? Remember the general statement that we were looking at up here earlier. Fraction of some number is another number. Suppose that it's the sum number that is the missing piece of information. So 75% of what number is 225? So we'll translate that to a mathematical statement. Again, first of all, we'll note that 75% is the same as the decimal, 0.75. So 0.75 times x is this 225. So how will we find x? We'll just divide both sides by the 0.75. So after dividing both sides, we find that x is equal to 225 divided by 0.75. And of course, x is 300. So remember, what we were looking to solve was 75% of what number is 225. So that what number is 300 by our analysis. And that is that 75% of 300 is 225. That's what we found, was the 300. So here's our third example. I've rewritten the order of the sentence just a little bit to make it read smoother. But suppose it's the percent that we don't know. 25 is what percent of 300? Or what percent of 300 is 25? Would have been the same way that we had it written before. Now, translate that, then 25 is what fraction of 300? So obviously we divide both sides by 300 and work on reducing this fraction. And it reduces to be 0.75. We need to change that to a percent. So there's our calculations. 225 is what percent, that's our x, of is multiplication 300. So 225 is what fraction of 300. We divide both sides by 300. We carried out that long division. And then we converted the decimal to a percent. So 75% is what x is. This PDF file is available in class. Okay, hope that helps. See you in class.